Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Reign of Troy Radio, episode 444, coming to you on Monday, September 12th. We're going to talk about USC's 41-28 win over the Stanford Cardinal, open up the mailbag, look back at the game, talk about the over-under, and so much more here on this episode. As always, you can follow Alicia over on Twitter at Penguin of Troy. You can follow me on Twitter at MichaelCastFS. You can follow Reign of Troy Radio at Reign of Troy on Twitter. Our Facebook is facebook.com/Reign of Troy. Email address reignoftroy@fanside.com. You can find us wherever you can find a podcast, over at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever your favorite podcast catcher. We are there, and we're right here live on YouTube as well. Just search Reign of Troy Radio on YouTube, and you will find us. I'm your host, Michael Castillo, joined along with my co-host here in the Reign of Troy studio in Los Angeles, Alicia Derritola.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. We are back for another episode here live on YouTube and coming to you wherever you're listening to us on your podcatcher. SC is 2-0. So far, things are right in the world, right?
Yeah, I mean, USC is 2-0. USC is moving up the rankings. USC is feeling good. There's reason to be excited. It's also one of the more fascinating weeks of the season for USC with Fresno State coming up.
Yeah.
So, let's ride.
Lots to discuss. The NFL season is back, which means the Jags are off to their traditional losing ways. You're a Charger fan. You got to be happy about that big win over the Raiders.
It would have been a typical Charger loss if they had managed to blow that lead to the Raiders, but they held on. They still blew the lead, but they held on.
There you go. I'm still getting used to the fact that I have to remember that there's NFL action on Sundays when I'm driving down the 405. I'm like, why is it so packed on a freaking Sunday? What the hell's going on?
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah. The guy with the Raider flag in front of me isn't just like an obnoxious Raider fan. He might actually be going to the game too.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Oops.
Got it. Yeah. Anyways, let's talk about this podcast. We got a new review over on Apple Podcasts. It is a 5-star from Pensacola 59. What'd they have to say?
Yeah, they said, Don and Donna Downer love your show, but you always dwell in the past. All caps, new season, new coach. Trojans will have a winning season. Enjoy the games. Thank you, Pensacola, for the 5-star review. If you're going to criticize us, that's the way to do it. One way, the 5-star review.
I'll take the 5 stars.
I'll take getting called a Downer favorite with the 5-star review, for sure. I think you and I both agree that the Trojans will have a winning season. I think both of us are enjoying the games, but
you predicted a 10-2 season, yeah.
I went 10-2. I mean, we'll see.
Yeah. Thank you for the review as always, and you can always review us over on Apple Podcasts, and it helps grow the show. If you're watching us live on YouTube, you can subscribe to the channel and like this episode, like this video. We'll pause, let you press the button right down wherever it is. And that helps grow the show as well. Share it with your friends. Tell all your coworkers. All those kind of things. And help grow Reign of Troy Radio. But, Alicia, I would press the soundboard button. We did find the soundboard. We got it working. It was working 5 minutes before we started to record. I was so excited because we're finally going to have the soundboard back. I was looking forward to pressing. I actually think this is optimistic, Alicia, and pessimistic, Alicia, out in full force. All those things. I was going to press it. I found the button. We choose not to run. All of those. I was so pumped. And then, like, literally right before we were started to record, at 7:01, when we're about to go live, we had to make the decision that you could not go live with us. For some reason, it was like just completely taking the whole audio.
Everything else works until you plug that thing in, and then it's like, nope, no dice. So I honestly, I am stumped on why that's a problem, but it's a thing to figure out for another day.
Yeah, I don't get it.
We were delayed enough getting on air for this one, having to move back for my sake. So, yeah.
So, anyways, if you're listening at home on your favorite podcast device, Here's the news chime. If you're watching on YouTube, you won't hear anything. Nope. Here it goes. All right, Alicia. Let's get into the news and start with the updated game time for USC's Week 4 matchup, the trip to Corvallis up to a Reser Stadium that's in the middle of a renovation. USC and the Beavers coming up in 2 weeks. Next week. It is now going to kick off at 6:30 p.m. on the Pac-12 networks. That's not great. This is a game that could potentially be a college game day pick. The Beavs are 2-0. The Trojans are 2-0. The Beavs got a big win on Saturday. Last second win up in Fresno against Fresno State, USC's current opponent for this upcoming week. And 6:30 p.m. on Pac-12 network. But you read a article over on the LA Times from Brady McCullough. What do you have to say?
Yeah, so basically he cited sources who said that the Pac-12 network situation is that Fox and ESPN are sort of biding their time on picking USC. So what happens when the schedule for the week, the broadcast schedule is set, is how would you describe it? It's almost like the waiver wire situation. Like each broadcaster gets to sort of draft a game that's part of their rights. Yeah. Or they get to choose, right? So
it's a lot like a fantasy draft.
It's like a fantasy draft, yeah.
In the sense that you get to pick what you have, but you only have
have so many options.
You only have so many options because contractually there is a pecking order. So
but this week Fox gets to pick first, and then next week ESPN gets to pick first, and after ESPN and Fox have had their pick, then the Pac-12 network gets to pick, and
then you have season long things where ESPN only gets they get a pick a week or whatever it is, or whatever the number is, and then they can run out of those things at the end of the year.
Yeah. So basically, what happened is USC has to be on Pac-12 network 3 times a season. That's contractually obligated. So USC was on Pac-12 network for Rice, but they will need to be on Pac-12 network 2 more times this season. So if you're ESPN and you took USC Oregon State, as intriguing a matchup as that is, if you're at ESPN or Fox and you're trying to decide, well, do we take this game, but know that there will be 2 weeks later on in the season that we won't be able to pick USC because they have to be on Pac-12 network? I think they looked at the they did the calculus and realized that in terms of Pac-12, then to miss USC potentially contending for the playoff, playing someone down in the second half of the season. They'd rather miss Oregon State, but have, Cal available if they
want to bank those picks later, right? Yeah. So if SC has to be on the Pac-12 network 3 times in a season, I guess 2 out of the first 3 games is
you're getting out of the way.
Yeah, you're getting it out of the way early, or out of the first 4 games in this instance, right? Fresno State. What channel's the Fresno State on? Do you remember?
It is on.
I should probably be more prepared for this. Either way,
it's 7:30 on. Where would the 7:30 kick be? ESPN, I thought, but
besides the point.
The scoreboard is loading. You guys will find out in 20 seconds when this thing loads.
No, but besides the point, this is the kind of thing that happens in the SEC all the time with CBS. Is that the way, and one of the reasons why the SEC is leaving CBS is because the way that the scheduling works, you're only allowed 5 games on CBS per team. So Alabama can only be on CBS 5 times. So what ends up happening is towards the end of the season, if Alabama has been on the CBS game 3 different times, and all of a sudden there's still the LSU game on the schedule, and there's the Iron Bowl, and they're going to play top 10 Ole Miss, one of those games CBS is going to have to sacrifice.
You have to pass, yeah.
You got to pass, and you got to kind of make sure that you still have one left for the Iron Bowl. So that's usually what ends up happening in these situations. That's what's happened in week 4 against Oregon State for USC. And
For the record,
Big Fox says our pal Kenny Martin.
Big Fox 7:30.
Yeah.
For Fresno State.
Yeah, so we will see that this Saturday, and then next Saturday, USC up in Corvallis, 6:30 p.m. on the Pac-12 networks. Let's go to the other news. Talking about players of the week. USC gets some representation here in the form of Caleb Williams and Tulitu Pelotu. Both are Pac-12 players of the week. Caleb Williams on the offensive side was 20 of 27, completing 74% of his passes for 341 yards and 4 touchdowns. He now ranks second nationally in completion percentage and passing efficiency. He's also third nationally in yards per attempt. Pretty good.
Yeah, he leads the Pac-12 in all of those things. I think this won't be the last time we see Caleb Williams as Pac-12 Player of the Week. I think you have to pencil him in right now. After 2 games of just seeing what he can do, you have to pencil him in as Offensive Player of the Year in the Pac-12 unless something ginormous changes.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Tuli on defense, 4 tackles for loss. Hell of a big game for him. 6 tackles overall. Did break up a pass, forced a fumble. That's probably statistically that is the best game you're ever going to see out of Tuli Tuipulotu. Not to say that he can't top that, but how are you going to see that much production out of a guy who plays a role like him? That is pretty much max effort, and more power to him.
Yeah, it's those havoc plays that I think make a huge difference. And USC is going to need guys like Tuli Tuipulotu to create those plays. They're going to need guys like Max Williams and Mekhi Blackman to come up with the forced turnovers that they did as well, because this is one of the things that we're going to continue to talk about with this defense. This defense is going to, this was the discussion you and I were having with Jake from What's Bruin Show in text messages. People were having this discussion on Twitter and stuff. The idea of, well, is this a bend but don't break defense? Sort of. Is it a boom or bust defense? Pretty much. And when you're one of those, you have to be opportunistic. You have to create havoc, and you have to take advantage of that havoc when it comes. So seeing Tuli Tuipulotu have those kind of impact plays, absolutely big game from him. Need more big games from him. And the rest of the supporting cast there on defense. So yeah, good for him.
Yeah, 100%. Let's talk about the polls, which just came out on Sunday. SC now up to number 7 in the AP poll, 8th in the in the coaches. SP Plus and Sagarin and stuff. I'm not too worried about those right now.
It's too early.
And mind you, the coaches in the AP poll are way too early. But
that's very true. Yes.
Everything is too early. But one of the things that you want to discuss here was the playoff stuff that ESPN has been putting together.
Yeah. So ESPN dropped a early playoff picks, and it was basically a round table. They had 15 writers who picked their playoff field, and 9 of the 15 had USC as the number 4 seed in the playoff. And my first thought was, these people are crazy. These people are crazy. What are you doing? No, absolutely not. And then I thought about it. Okay, if
here we go. You're getting suckered in.
No. If I were picking a playoff pick after the first 2 weeks that we've had, based on the very incomplete season that we've already seen, if I had to choose playoff picks and I had to go deeper than 3, I would be at a loss, because you go Georgia, you go Bama, you go Ohio State. I get why they don't put Michigan at number 4, because Michigan and Ohio State are going to play each other. Oklahoma was up 7-3 against Kent State in the first half the other day. They have a much tougher sled than USC would to win the Big 12. They have to go through, I think, a more difficult conference slate to get there. Oklahoma State, I think there's still questions about their defense. ASU played them, prevented it from being a blowout, almost competitive game. So, I don't know about Oklahoma State. Baylor lost. Texas A&M lost, and that's a third SEC team. Just Notre Dame lost. All of these I think that when you're it's too early to be picking these anyways, but if you had to pick today, if you had to, I get picking USC over the other options. I do. Do I think that that's the truth of what will happen? No, because teams like Baylor losing early doesn't have to kill them. Teams like BYU,
Utah losing on the road to Florida.
Utah losing on the road to Florida could still be up there by the like. There is so much more of this season to go. We have seen a smidgen of what truth there is to what any of these teams are. We don't know the truth of USC or Oklahoma or any of the teams that lost this past week. They could turn. I mean, the best time to lose is early in the season. So, like, you get going, you get hot, and then suddenly you are the playoff team. So, I just think it's an insane prospect to even try to have these conversations right now. I think this has been one of the most, rankings are always irrelevant to a point. But like this year of the AP and coaches has been the most irrelevant that I can remember in a while in terms of like, let
me jump in there because I think it's easy to say that now, but I think that every year we're saying the same thing about like, well, the coaches poll this year is more relevant than ever or whatever. Like we sort of have that perspective every single year. And really, it goes back to since the playoff was formed, everyone's sort of outlook at what the rankings are changed. Because back before the playoff, it was you sorted by the lowest number of wins, lowest number of losses, and then
it mattered where you started.
And it mattered where you started, and then that's just where you were, and there was no moving up or down, right?
Like, well, you move up or down relative to your performance that week. So
yes.
If you lose in early, you have more weeks to gain spots.
Right.
In that sense.
But if you struggled, you weren't going to drop.
Yeah.
And that was an antiquated way of looking at the polls, but that's how they always were.
Yeah.
The only thing that I like about the playoff coming into college football, because you know me, I'm like anti playoff expansion and everything, and the 12-team playoff is going to kill me. But beside that, the thing that I love is that we've reevaluated what polls should be. And not just the predictive versus the resume kind of thing of polls and the two different dynamics there, but yeah, like let's stop worrying about wins and losses. Like case in point, Texas. If we're ranking teams based on how good they are, that doesn't mean ranking them on how many wins they have.
Yeah.
Like this is already independent of the record. So why should a team like Texas get penalized for losing the number one team?
Well, you could make the argument that Texas's loss to Alabama was more impressive than any other win this weekend for any team.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many of the teams out there would have given Texas the game, given Alabama the game that Texas gave them.
And they're up to 21. They're 21st in the poll. So they went up, which never would have happened before.
Yeah.
Because, you lost, so then you must go down. You won, so you must go up, if anything, but only dependent if the teams in front of you lost. Like, that never made any sense. So, yeah, to go back to your point about, well, if you look at it and if you're going to just be realistically pick 4 conference winners and you're going to pick the big 3 right now, which is Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State, and you're going to just assume that one of those SEC teams is going to get in as an at-large, which is probably fair at this point. And then you got to go to who's going to be out of the ACC, who's going to be out of the Big 12, and who's going to be out of the Pac-12.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I forgot to mention Clemson, who is the biggest paper tiger fraud, in my opinion, in the poll. So,
I mean, Clemson has been a struggle bus the last year and a half or so, but they're still Clemson. So you still want to give them the benefit of the doubt. So either way, I get it, but also let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's take everything slowly.
Well,
week by week.
The best thing about the playoff is that they don't bother ranking teams until week 10. So, do that.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into talking about USC's 41-28 win over the Stanford Cardinal. Alicia, we've sort of looked back at it, and we talked about it a lot in the CarCast. We had a super long CarCast. It went like an hour and a half, and it was a hell of a lot of fun to do a live CarCast for the first time. I'm stoked about doing that for the rest of the season. As much as I miss going to games and being at games, the live CarCast kind of cool.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Pretty awesome.
Kind of fun.
Yeah.
But let's talk about like looking back at this game. You especially had a lot of thoughts about the third quarter and really the second half, because the biggest talking point in this game is how dominant SC was in the first half and how in the second half seemingly not so much. Didn't score a single touchdown in the second half. Had to settle for 3 field goal attempts. 2 were made by Dennis Lynch, but 1 was missed. So there was only 6 points that SC scored, whereas Stanford added a couple touchdowns late to kind of sort of make the score look a little bit closer, than the game look closer than it was, which probably isn't fair, because when you consider how many yards Stanford gained, that they had 2 fumbles inside the 5 or 2 turnovers inside the 5, this easily could have gone down to the wire, but it didn't.
But okay, so here's the thing, and I went back and watched the second half, at least the offensive drives in the second half. And like, it surprised me as someone who watched the entire game on Saturday, definitely, it surprised me that the score was 41-14 going into the fourth quarter. Like, I feel like I forgot that. It was 41-14 going into the fourth quarter. It was a bona fide 100% blowout. USC could have cleared the benches. And honestly, like, I wonder if our perception of the game would have been slightly different if Riley had just put Miller Moss in for the fourth quarter and just let that be that. Or I think he didn't, because he was so unhappy with the results of the 3 drives in the third quarter, and he wanted to give the offense and Caleb another opportunity to sort of put a an exclamation point on it. And I don't disagree with him doing that.
Right.
But it was a bona fide blowout. Like, it was 41-14.
But this still is one of those weird games where on the scoreboard, it was absolutely a blowout.
Yeah.
In terms of just sheer yardage and moving the ball back and forth, like, both teams were pretty much tit for tat for most of the game.
This is what 4 turnovers do, though. Like, this is the scoreline you see when you have 4 turnovers.
This is why we talked about it for years. That so many things change. I mean, we talked about the empty calories that SC had in games because they weren't finishing off drives and they were committing turnovers.
See Stanford in this game.
Exactly.
I mean, we used to call what USC was doing very Stanford-y, because this was like that one year when Stanford could not for the life of them score in the red zone. Like, it's a thing. So, yeah, I mean, I just think it's sort of an interesting observation that I remember people talking about the palindromic score, but like, I don't think it clicked in my head that it was 41-14 going into the fourth quarter. Like,
yeah, that's a big margin.
Yeah. Okay.
And if David Shaw takes out Tanner McKee, and they sort of surrender,
it's a different.
I think it ends up looking a lot different too.
Yes. And that's why I wanted to talk about the third quarter specifically. I also went through and looked at the fourth quarter, but I think it matters less because by that time it was sort of the same story as the third quarter.
Yeah.
So there was a question in the CarCast of, did USC take their foot off the gas in the third quarter? And I went through to look specifically at, did the play calling change significantly? Did they run the ball significantly more often? Were they just going through the motions? And my observation from watching those drives in the third quarter is absolutely not. The only thing you can accuse USC of doing that would be suggested as taking their foot off the gas is Caleb Williams was letting the play clock run down. And I suppose if you're talking about tempo, I could see how that could maybe get your rhythm out of order if you're letting the clock run down to 5 seconds or so between each play. Where I went back to watch a few drives in the first quarter, and he was definitely like, sometimes he was snapping with like 8 or 5 seconds left on the clock. Sometimes he was snapping with 30 seconds left on the play clock, 25, 20, 18, whatever. Like, it was all sort of whenever they felt like it. So the tempo, I think, is where you can accuse the foot coming off the gas. But at the same time, you're up 41-14. Like, you're up 35-14 at halftime. Like, you should be letting the clock run down on every play. So like, I'm not going to criticize them for that. But let's go through some of these drives. The first field goal drive, they had that big gainer to Jordan Addison. So they on the first play of the half for the offense, they're going deep and they hit something and sets them up into field goal range essentially. And then there's just a couple of misses. There's that rollout that the Caleb Williams had where Dye had the no blocking, no Rocky play, and Caleb just missed Taj Washington, who stumbled early on in his route. And so I just think the timing was off there for that whole play, and that's on a third down, so they have to kick a field goal. The second drive is actually a long drive where USC is moving the ball fairly well. They get into a third and long because of a holding flag on Cortland Ford on a Travis Dye first down run. They get into third and long. Caleb is able to scramble out and get horse collar tackled, so USC converts that. The drive continues. This is the sequence that makes me think you can't say they took their foot off the gas because these players did not have their foot off the gas. There's a Caleb Williams keeper where he has the most disrespectful stiff arm I've ever seen a quarterback give a defender. There's a third down play where Austin Jones punches a dude in the face mask, spins around, fights for yardage, and then the play continues, and there's one play where I think Caleb Williams lost his cool. There was some pressure coming off the right side, and he hurried a throw in the end zone to Mario Williams. I think he had way more time than he thought he did. I thought he hurried that throw, and forced it into a spot that wasn't there. I think if he takes his time, there's more of a chance there, but that sets up a third and long. And on that third and long, Cortland Ford gets absolutely destroyed coming off the edge from David Bailey, who was a problem for USC throughout the game, and who, if I have one big criticism of the offense, it's they didn't account for David Bailey enough because he comes up later as blowing up a fourth quarter drive that USC had with a sack untouched off the edge as well. So for future references, I hope that Lincoln either does an adjustment for himself so that the players know, hey, that dude is the danger guy, take care of him, or that the offensive line pays more attention, or that Caleb Williams slides his protections, or whatever needs to happen for that, because I think that was, if I had to point to one thing that really blew up this offense in the second half, there are two things. One, it's David Bailey, just singularly David Bailey, and two, it's just penalties. There was a holding penalty. There was things that pulled back plays that got USC first downs, and that's where they really ran into trouble. But this long second drive, they get into the third and long. David Bailey blows up the play. They miss the field goal. Final drive of the third quarter is after the fumble that wasn't a scoop and score. Again, they're moving the ball fine. They get into a 3rd and 2. Caleb completes a pass to Brendan Rice. Should be moving the chains. Instead, it's OPI. 3rd and 17. What are you going to do? They run with Dye. And again, did they take their foot off the gas? Running with Dye? Maybe. But the players certainly weren't acting like it was over. They dragged Dye forward for another 8 yards. So
I thought they were going to go for it on 4th down on that play too. Because it was going to be like a 4th and 6.
Yeah. And they could have, but they take the field goal. I don't blame them. I think getting up to 40 points probably makes you a lot more comfortable in the end game, as we see. But yeah, it's just, I just think I think Caleb Williams had a 2, maybe 3 plays in that third quarter where he could have done better, but you're asking for perfection, and that's not fair. The penalties were that OPI was very, very costly. It probably cost USC USC a touchdown because they moved the chains there and they can keep going. I do think that Stanford's defense did a lot better job of keeping things in front of them after that Jordan Addison long play, and the long passes that USC attempted in the fourth quarter, Caleb either outright missed or were well covered. And Stanford did a better job of stopping the run from gashing. Travis Dye still had a couple of nice runs, but there were more, 1 yard gain, 2 yard gains that put USC in sort of a second and long situation that, probably doesn't help the flow of the drive. So my thesis here is I don't think USC did anything tactically here that was contributing to this. I think that when you have penalties, they're going to hurt you, and you are going to have a couple of drives per game that your quarterback isn't going to be all world, and you're not going to score touchdowns on them.
Yeah, and I think that really what it comes down to, you can look at the early parts of those drives too, the first and second downs, because those drives end up failing because of errors on third down, whether it be a penalty, whether it be Cortland Ford getting destroyed by David Bailey, you said, on a third down, or the Brendan Rice OPI, which is on a third down. Well, early on in the game, they weren't getting the third downs, right?
Yes.
Like they didn't have those moments where they were getting third downs. So not only were they ending up in third down situations, but when you end up in third down situations, those are always going to be 50-50
Make or
things
break
about
plays, yeah.
you're going to make them or you're not. So if you're not picking up the first downs on first and second down and leading yourself to third downs, then that's going to happen. At the same point, SC has gotten to third down fewer than any other team in the country. So like it feels like a little nitpicky to sit here and say, well, get the first down on second down then. You know what I mean? Like SC is doing that literally better than anyone else. Literally better.
Yeah. And they were up 41-14. And that's the other thing I observed. I didn't watch. I had limited time to do this, so I didn't get to watch the defensive drives. But in fast forwarding through them, I did notice one thing. I don't think Stanford had a chance of winning this game unless they created a defensive touchdown. Because the combination of USC drawing out the clock, like USC killed a lot of clock in these drives that I talked about in the second half. And the combination of USC's defense wasn't letting Stanford quick strike, basically. Like Stanford was chewing clock on their drives too. So, like, yes, Stanford scores the two touchdowns in the second half. But I don't know that the second half defense was ever going to give, like, Stanford was going to run out of time.
Yeah,
before they gave USC a chance.
Stanford's problem is the third quarter happens. And yes, nobody scores a touchdown in the third quarter. SC scores 2 field goals. Stanford doesn't score anything.
Yeah.
But time of possession is 12-14 to 2:46 in that third quarter. Stanford only runs 9 plays and gains 39 yards.
Yeah.
Stanford needed to come out in the second half, and it continued to be a thing where they were driving the length of the field both times. Like both drives in the third quarter, they needed that to be the case.
Yeah.
SC ended up getting stops 2 times in that third quarter and forced them to punt. Well, that's the difference in the game right there. Like that's the difference in a real comeback and one that ends up being sort of a teaser rally at the end for Stanford.
Now, this is going to be just a cautionary tale for USC. If they don't get those 2 red zone turnovers, I mean, they were like goal line turnovers. Stanford maybe has 28 points at halftime, and it's 28-35. And then those field goal drives in the second half are significantly more costly. But still, the defense, I thought, in the second half, just by the nature of forcing Stanford to have to go on long drives to score when they did.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was really the whole game. It was, yes, Stanford was able to gain a bunch of yards, and they did gain a billion yards in this game. At the same time, SC forced them to not do it all in big, huge chunk plays, where they would have to go the length of the field to sustain those really, really, really long drives.
Yeah.
And it's hard to put together really long, sustainable drives, right? Like,
yes.
It's hard to do that. And then you put it all together, and you're going to end up with more opportunities to turn the ball over like they did, more opportunities for things to not go right like they did.
Well, like what happened to USC's offense in that third quarter. If you look at it, like Stanford's got to feel good about forcing those drives to be as long as they did to get the field goals. Like, those were good defensive drives for Stanford from results perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it ultimately has SC winning 41-28 because Stanford runs out of time. SC is able to ride that hot start in the first half offensively, and that's all she wrote. The finish your drives, folks. Finish your drives, and don't turn over the ball in the red zone, or really at all. And if you don't do those things, you're going to win the game. SC didn't do those things; they won the game. Stanford did those things, and that prevented them from really competing in this game, despite moving the ball at will on USC for most of the game, right?
Yeah.
That's the difference. That's the absolute difference. Let's go and revisit our over-under picks from the preview pod. All right, Alicia. Last week on Over Under, I believe you went 7-5, and I went 5-6. Wasn't good for me. I needed to have a big comeback here.
I don't like this.
Let's see what happened. First over under pick for you. You said over under 145.5 rushing yards for Stanford. I, of course, said under because we were talking all last week. Stanford is going to want to throw the ball a lot. Well, they came out extremely balanced, ran the ball a ton, had a lot of success with E.J. Smith, and then later with Filkins.
Filkins.
I can never remember Filkins. Yeah,
Filkins, who is either the fullback or the assistant in the office that the boss is always screaming at, like, "Get me Filkins!"
Yeah, Filkins.
Yeah.
221 yards rushing for Stanford, so that means it was over. Me saying under locks in the over for you. 50.9% of those of you who played along at home got that right. Right on the edge there. Next one, I set the line at 68.5 Caleb Williams rushing yards. And he had 4. You said under. You get it. That locks me into the over. 70.9% of the people said under. And the under ultimately pays out there. Of course, this included sack yardage.
Yeah, a couple of late sacks, really. But he only scrambled a couple times. And
yeah, he wasn't going to get that anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, you look at the app, like the rushing numbers.
Just gains.
I just pulled it up. He scrambled for a gain of 10, gain of 8, another gain of 10, 4. Yeah, he wasn't going to get it. I thought he was fine on the ground. I think that at least one of the sacks, I thought he held the ball a little bit too long.
And there were a couple of moments where it felt like he could have had, and that's the other extenuating circumstances here. The condition of Stanford's field was not good. There were a couple moments for USC where just slips really were the thing that sank a play and thus helped sink a drive. So there was at least one where it looked like Caleb could have turned upfield and gotten some yardage, but just bogged down by that boggy field.
Yeah, 30 rushing yards he had if you take out the sacks, so still wasn't going to be close. 4 rushing yards total, given how college football counts it. Next one, you said 1.5 Travis Dye, no blocky, no rocky moments. I took the under, locks you into the over. 58.2% of you guys at home took the under, and it was under. We came up with 1. You said there was 1 play, and it was in the third quarter.
Yeah, it was as Caleb Williams scrambling back around, Travis Dye comes back around and just gets in, takes on an offensive lineman and frees up Caleb to go free.
100%. Next one, I said 0.5 Tanner McKee interceptions. The thing I don't like about over-under is my propensity to do these 0.5 lines.
Hard
which is basically the yes or no's.
Yeah.
And it annoys me because when you end up in a situation like this where you're like, well, that's low risk. I'll take the over. Locks me into the under. 89.1% of you guys at home took the over.
Mm-hmm.
It was 2. He threw 2 picks first quarter.
Yep.
Yeah.
What can you do?
Live and learn. That's what I can do. Next one. You said 0.5. Another yes or no.
This is the flip side there.
The inverse. You said 0.5 sacks for Corey Foreman. I said over.
You took the over.
Why did I take the over?
Because I think a lot of people thought that.
78.2% of the Robot said it.
Yeah, that Corey was getting close in the first game, that he could get there.
Yeah, it was 0. He had 0, which gives you the under.
Yeah.
If you're keeping score at home, it's so far a good week for you. Last one for me, I said over under 11.5 third down attempts. This is because SC only had 7 against Rice in week 1. You said over. Locks me into the under. 51% of you at home said over. I don't know what the total was, but it was less. It was the under. So Stat Broadcast, which does the official stats, the official online stat database, says that USC had 7 third down attempts. CFB stats is what we use for like most of our statistics that we talk about. Says it was 8. Either way, 7, 8, doesn't matter. Qualifies as an under.
Do they take away a third down attempt if there was like a penalty? No, they track it, because I was just trying to think that horse collar on Caleb Williams was on a third down. The Brendan Rice OPI was on a third down.
Okay, so I just pulled up in-stat broadcasts. When you go to third down plays, it says that there's 10 and 2 penalties, which is 8.
So
then why does it still say 7?
Weird.
Don't know.
Okay.
Don't get it. I don't know. Anyways, last one.
Either way, that was a great, like, not just a great line by you, but like a great draw to put the over-under of talking about third down attempts, because
it was a talking point in the game.
I mean, like we talked about earlier, that was the difference between the first half and the second half. That really was. It was USC didn't face third downs in the first half, and they faced third downs in the second.
Yeah, exactly. Last one came from a viewer on YouTube, Gary, who said 1.5 passes batted down by Eric Gentry. You took the over. I took the under. 74.5% of you guys at home said under. It was under. It was 0.
Yeah.
He's a tall dude. Eric Gentry is a tall guy, 6'6".
I thought he got one, but it was just over the top.
Those stats are so hard to nail down. That's the problem. Like they don't get tabulated well, and it's a difficult one. So all told, for the week, you went 4-3. I went 3-4. On the season, you are 11-7. I am 8-10. The big winner this week, G Young 08, who went 7-0.
Wow. Perfect game.
Yeah, the only one to go 7-0. We had a bunch of 6-1s, including Tat Freak, Scott Cox, Ocean Beach Trojans, Callie Matt, and Callie Cat. I think they're cheating.
Like, you think it's the same person?
Well, no, I'm pretty sure that we met them at the meetup in Utah a few years ago. Callie Matt and Callie Cat.
Why do you think they're cheating?
Clearly they have the same picks, 6-1.
I don't think that's cheating.
It's a little sus.
I wouldn't go throwing out accusations against our viewers.
No, I'm not saying that they're cheating. I'm saying that there's colluding going on.
Colluding is the word. Yes. Colluding. Okay.
Yes, colluding.
Yeah.
Different than canoodling.
Yes.
Colluding. Ryan from Arizona also went 6-1. So big ups to all of them. We go to the season leaders, and look who we have at the top. It is Callie Cat, who's 15-3.
Well,
There's been 18 total over-unders.
They weren't colluding in week 1 then, because where's Callie Matt?
Clearly not. This is true.
Callie Cat is the superior one, is what all I'm seeing.
Tied for second with a 14-4 record, we got Jay Vandy, our buddy LA Fred, Ryan from Arizona, and of course G Young 08, who dominated in week 2.
Callie Cat is in the chat right now and confirms that we did meet them in Utah. Yeah.
Well, awesome.
Yeah. Good job, Callie Cat.
I'm glad I'm right. I'm glad I have a good memory for that.
I do not, so I hope no one's ever offended when I'm just like,
I have like an internal database of like,
I remember
this person I've heard of. We met them at the Churchill in Phoenix. Like, yeah.
I remember like faces, but I couldn't tell you anybody's name at all.
I try to remember those things. She said, Callie Matt refused to tell me his answers this week.
He's denying the collusion.
There we go. All right. Anyways, game predictions. Bill Connolly's numbers, of course, which we've talked about before, probably not accurate at this point, said that SC would win 34-25. Vegas had SC by 8. You said SC 40-25. I went down with the ship and with my 9-month-old Stanford beating SC for the first time prediction.
How torn were you when Stanford got to 28-41 and was going for that onside kick? Like, how torn were you between USC winning this game versus USC
this
getting...
This game never felt in doubt.
No, it really didn't. They needed 2 onside kicks, honestly. It would have been
completely different if there weren't those 2 picks early on in the game.
Yeah.
But it would have been
I felt pretty good about like I said in the CarCast, that went almost exactly how I sort of expected it to go.
Well, there you go. There you go. Yeah, of course, it was 41-28. SC beat Stanford. All right, let's get to some mailbag stuff. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to type in a question, put the word question at the front if you want. That helps us figure it out where all the questions are, and star them throughout the broadcast here. And let's get into the mailbag, shall we? Let's start with a Slack message we got from our pal Marcelo, who says, the famous adage is that teams improve the most from week 1 to week 2. So what improvements do y'all notice? What do you got?
Well, okay, let's be fair. The offense did not need to improve from week 1 to week 2, and we certainly saw the same offense in the first half against Stanford as we saw in the first half against Rice. So I think that
I'm having difficulty on this one because I think that in a lot of ways you can say you saw the same USC performance in both games.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
The difference was the opponent.
The difference was the opponent, and the opponent being able to fight back a little bit on offense to make it look closer, which I didn't think Rice had that just had that juice. They were pretty, but it also, when the turnovers happened,
full of knobs too.
they were full of knobs. When the turnovers happened was different too, because Rice's turnovers all came in the third quarter, and like that is demoralizing as all hell when you have a third quarter like that. Just the way USC's defense. Well,
the third quarter, but also at the end of the half.
Yeah, at the end of the half. Like it was just more in
the turnover sort of bookended the half to where it really just would break Rice's soul there.
Yeah, so I just thought circumstances were slightly different. I think that the improvement that we need to see from USC is not the kind of thing that you can say would follow that adage of week 1 to week 2, because I think it really needs to be the defense across week 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, being able to prove that they can be in the right spots. I saw a stat that was talking about how USC had drastically improved their tackling. Like just statistically, they've had like 10 missed tackles in 2 weeks, which is like some like 5% or something of plays or whatever. And last year it was just like significantly more than that. So I wish I remembered the actual thing, but either way, it was clear that the tackling has improved. So it's not that USC is giving up yards because they can't tackle. It's that USC is giving up yards because they're vulnerable as far as the running game goes. Running backs are finding lanes to run in, and receivers are getting open. And so I think that as the season goes on, you just want to see players be in the right spots more often.
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't think you can say you improve from 1 week to 2. You do it from 2 to 3 to 3 to 4, 4 to 5.
Yeah. The other thing, I'll give you one. I think the downfield passing much better in week 2 because I think they took more shots downfield.
Yeah.
The long pass to Jordan Addison in the second quarter was just
beautiful.
Such a thing of beauty, and they didn't necessarily have to do that against Rice.
No.
The Rice had the Rice game had more intermediate passes downfield that ended up being long gains with yak yards, whereas I think Saturday against Stanford there were more passes downfield. So I think that was one thing that improved. And the other thing is, for the lack of definitive things that said that they improved, that is not a knock on this team. That's just a mark of like they've played very consistently in the first 2 games.
Oh, the punter.
There was a poor punt in the first.
First game,
the one from Aiden Sleep Dalton in the Rice game was not good.
Was bad, so terrible. No, and then in against Stanford, he pinned him deep late in the game.
Let me pull up the.
So the punter.
Where's punting? 2 punts, 64 yards, a long of 36, but it was inside the 20.
Yeah, and I think it might have been inside the 10 even. It was a good kick.
That broadcast only says I-20, which I who cares if it's inside the 20? Tell me if it's inside the 10 or the 5.
Yeah.
All right. We got a YouTube comment on the CarCast. So this is from a couple days ago. I think you underrated Stanford's offense. Plus, they broke out a new scheme that USC couldn't prepare for on film. I think the judgment on the defense is a little too harsh here. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Clemson isn't judged the same way when they win by a couple of touchdowns. Just my opinion.
I would agree that Stanford brought out things that USC wouldn't have had film on, and that contributed to the way Stanford was able to move the ball. And that's why it's very important to get your turnovers and to create your turnovers and to deal with things that way. I would reject the idea of like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Clemson not being judged the same way, because Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Clemson have significantly better defenses than this defense.
Also, if they give up a touchdown, there's someone on a message board that is like wanting to jump off a cliff.
Oh, absolutely. But like Alabama's winning a game against Texas like 20-19. That means they're only giving up 19 points.
Yeah.
Georgia has the best defense in the country, so it's like no one's going to talk about Georgia pitching a shutout. Ohio State, when they struggled, Notre Dame still didn't give up a lot of points. Like, and it's also there's different levels. Listen,
those teams have the benefit of the doubt at this point too.
We want benefit of the doubt, and also like I want to enjoy USC games, and I have enjoyed these two immensely. Like, I think there's so much to be positive about, but also we're watching the game. The defense is outside of the turnovers they create and the havoc plays they created later. They're not stopping people the way they need to stop people to get that benefit of the doubt that you see from like Bama and Georgia and Ohio State and Clemson. Like, they're just not there.
Yeah.
My argument continues to be they didn't get All-Americans through the transfer portal. Like, the offense got All-Americans.
Mm-hmm.
The defense didn't. They got Shane Lee, who has been very good, but like it's not the same level. The defensive rebuild is so much bigger. Give them time. It's okay. We can when we're critiquing them, it's constructive. I'm not trying to like say that they're trash. They are infants learning how to walk. Like, let's give them time. I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, you said that the defense didn't get All-Americans. Where I will push back on that is, yes, the offense literally got an All-American, Jordan Addison, who was the Biletnikoff winner. And Caleb Williams, whether he be at Oklahoma or he be at SC, would have been a top 5 Heisman contender going into the season.
Travis Dye was the Pac-12's leading rusher.
Yes. But on top of that, when you look at the defense, no, they didn't get an All-American, but I think that you are hoping that Kalen Bullock can become an All-American. You're hoping that Eric Gentry can become an All-American.
But even those
you're hoping that Tuli Tuipulotu can become an All-American. And you're hoping that Shane Lee's one good year at Alabama 3 years ago meant something.
Yeah.
And I think there's a good likelihood that of those 4 hopes, multiple of those things will come true, because I believe in those players and I think that they're good players.
They take time.
But it's a different kind of hope, where the offensive guys came in completely proven. And the defensive guys, even the ones who didn't transfer in, like Bullock and Tuipulotu, you're still hopeful of seeing the best. Whereas for the offensive guys, you've already seen what their best looks like. You know what I mean?
I also think it's just the learning curve on defense is going to be more difficult than, especially with a quarterback who was in this system last year.
Yeah. I mean, look at the defense last year. It's like historically bad.
They're starting from scratch. Like,
yeah.
And I don't think we're being negative by pointing out that they are starting from a zero, and the fact that they have created 8 turnovers in 2 games. Good on them. Like,
it's incredible.
This is, if you're going to be a defense that's going to give up 1 million yards, which USC's defense last year absolutely did, create turnovers. That's why I'm not super critical even of the defense in the second. Like, again, the defense gave up 14 points in the first half, 14 points in the second half. Sign me up for that for the rest of the season. Yes. If you sign me up for that for the rest of the season, USC's going undefeated. Like,
well, we talked about it before.
The problem is just
if SC gives in the holds teams to the mid-20s, they're gonna win just about every game because you would think that this offense is gonna score more than 28 points.
Yeah. So like in year one on defense, to me, it's the ends justify the means as far as I'm concerned, because there's so much going on with this defense that they have to improve from, starting from zero. So if they're going to be the most opportunistic defense in the history of mankind, then good on them for being the most opportunistic defense in the history of mankind. When they inevitably slip up and give up 50 points, which I think will happen this season, I'm going to sit here and say, yeah, I expected that, because this defense still has a long way to go. I'm not going to be losing my crap about it, in theory. I mean, maybe I will be, but in theory, because it's sort of what I expect. So I think the defense has already exceeded my expectations this season, just because of the turnovers. So I think that you can sort of be honest about what this defense is, and also give them their due, because I think they are performing admirably at the very least.
Yeah, we have to remember that in college football right now, the defenses are way behind the offense.
Yes.
That's just how it is. There's a reason why Alabama is giving up twice the number of points per game that they do now than they did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Because the game has changed. The game has absolutely changed. And now it's all about making sure you score 40 points and holding your team to 20-something. SC did that against Stanford. So at worst, this is just what it needed to be, right? And in year one, I think that the most important thing is to have an offense that is so good, or as good as they are in year one, which is incredible, that you have the luxury of living through the defensive rebuild and giving them time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to be perfect in week one or week two. And if they were perfect in week two, that would be, insane that they were that far along.
Yes.
So, yeah. Then again, it gives you still room to grow. Let's go to some questions from the chat here. Cam Lifestyle says, have either of you heard about Gary Bryant Jr. being disgruntled behind the scenes? Any truth about his role in the first two games?
I don't think Michael and I have inside information.
No.
We don't have, certainly can't speak to his mindset. I think certainly he has been less involved than he absolutely would have hoped going into the season. But like I've said in the past, if a player is unhappy with their role, then I don't think you cater to them.
Yeah.
If you have people ahead of them in the pecking order who are producing. And I think that the four guys that are ahead of him in the pecking order, as we see it, are not giving us reason to say that Gary Bryant Jr. is getting screwed or anything like that. So the season will play out the way it does. And if he keeps putting in the work, I think his opportunities will come eventually. Because eventually there will be injuries. Eventually there will be situations where one guy just has a breakout day or not. But
we've talked about it before. There's like eight or nine different dudes who could be super important components of this receiving core.
Yeah.
And when you have 8 or 9 dudes, you're bound for 2 or 3 of them to surprise you, 2 or 3 of them to disappoint you, 2 or 3 of them to be injured, and maybe 2 or 3 of them to be disgruntled. That's just how it's going to be. I can't speak to, like Alicia said, we can't speak to the Gary Bryant stuff, but when you look at how everything is going right now, I don't know how you can, as a fan watching the stuff, I don't know how you can, have any other thought than SC's in good hands as it is right now. Obviously, you'd love for Gary Bryant Jr. to be involved. A little inside baseball stuff where I get frustrated is when we're making we got to make YouTube thumbnails now. And we got to make thumbnails for the CarCast. And I'm like, oh, well, I got to find a game from last year in which they're on the road. So they'll be wearing white. So, okay, let's go to Getty Images. Find a game where SC was wearing white so we can pretend it was a Stanford thing because the game hasn't happened yet. Well, here's a picture of Gary Bryant Jr. in a white jersey. And so it makes it easy because after the first game, the thumbnail from the Rice CarCast is Gary Bryant in an SC jersey in an afternoon game at the Coliseum from last year because I had to make that thumbnail 3 days before our CarCast.
Yeah.
It made sense. And then you watch the game and like he had like one catch against Rice or whatever it was. And you're like,
what are you going to do?
I don't know what to do.
Yep.
Anyways, let's go to a question we got from Cameron in Frisco, Texas. I already miss Frisco, Texas. Miss Hutchins.
Yeah.
Anyways, he says, with Notre Dame's quarterback out for the season, are you still doubling down on USC beating them in November? Sorry about your alma mater, Alicia. Cameron from Frisco, Texas.
Notre Dame plays Cal this weekend.
They do.
And if you had told me before the season that one of those teams would be 2-0 and one of those teams would be 0-2, I would have told you it was Cal that was 0-2. It's Notre Dame.
I mean, yes, but then you look at Cal's
who did
schedule.
Cal play? Yeah,
Cal has played like UC Davis, and I don't know who they played last week, but
yeah. I mean, I think Notre Dame might be in a little trouble. They hired a first-time head coach. We don't know what he's going to be able to do here, but he's got a hell of a job on his hands to keep this team motivated and keep them focused on improving. The quarterback situation is not good. I said before that I think they were going to really miss the quarterback, the Wisconsin transfer, Jack Cohn from last year. Yeah. That has come to pass. Ty Buckner has not been good this year. Him being out means they're down to the second string quarterback who did not look good in the time that he came in. So Notre Dame might be in trouble. That's still a rivalry game though. So against all odds, you just
SC Notre Dame.
SC Notre Dame.
Notre Dame Cal.
No.
What?
No, SC Notre Dame.
Notre Dame and Cal might be the two most different universities of all time.
Yeah. No, the rivalry.
Cal and BYU might be
Cal and BYU. Yeah. The rivalry game at the end of the season with USC and Notre Dame, we have a long way to go. So, my prediction would remain that USC will beat Notre Dame, but we've got a long way to go, guys.
Yeah, I have a lot of faith in Freeman. I really liked him as a hire, the Notre Dame hire there, but a first-time head coach is always going to be difficult. There's going to be growing pains in year one.
That's so.
I thought there would be maybe less growing pains than SC, just not because Freeman is greater than Riley. Like that's not my thought process there, but mostly because
had less of a rebuild.
They had less of a rebuild to do because you're taking over for a established, very good coach in Brian Kelly, whereas Riley had to come in and pretty much start from scratch.
Yes, but this was a conversation that the Broncos just missed the game-winning field goal attempt. The conversation that we had a lot of the time with Clay Helton was that is not a program that should be hiring a coach that is at the level of Marcus Freeman. Like Marcus Freeman's first head coaching job should happen at Cincinnati or like UCF or I don't know. Go do something with Coastal Carolina and that, like those kind. He should not have been given the keys to Notre Dame. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Let's go to a message we got from our buddy Kenny Martin. How long does Clemson keep getting the benefit of the doubt?
Until they lose, until someone puts that offense out of its misery.
I think it's until they're like third in the ACC or something like that. I mean, let's be real. It took until like last year for people to stop giving Stanford the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And they didn't win national championships. Right? Like this year was the first time that we talked about Stanford and people were like, yeah, but Stanford sucks, remember? Like before that, even if Stanford was not good, people would be like,
nope.
But it's
Stanford.
But
I mean,
it's
that
Stanford,
was me.
right? So I think it's going to be a little while. I think it also might take multiple quarterbacks because and the sad thing is I think we all had thought that DJ is like really good, right?
DJ
you can just go to DJ and you just don't have to. You don't have to try it. I just say DJ.
I used to be able to say it, and now I haven't tried to say it in a while. DJ, yeah.
Just say DJ.
If you want to see what brain drain looks like, look at Clemson's offense.
Well, the problem is here's the thing. Here's the real answer. Dabo Swinney missed an opportunity. He needed the Seahawks to come in and hire him before the drain ate him.
Are you making a Pete Carroll reference?
Yes, because that was the problem with Pete Carroll's teams at SC.
Whoever
the brain drain.
Are they in their Jeremy Bates phase?
Yes, they're in their Jeremy Bates phase. Because you look at
worse, because at least Jeremy Bates' offense put up 30 points.
This is the problem with Pete Carroll's SC era versus Nick Saban's, is that and I wonder if this is because Nick Saban went back to the NFL and failed a second time. Well, he left as a coordinator and then went as a head coach and then came back. And maybe if Pete Carroll would have done that, he would have fixed things. But the problem with Pete Carroll is that he had all those great assistants early on in his tenure at SC, and he never knew how to replace them. Everyone just went. You had someone like Rocky Seto go from being a GA into a DC.
Well,
and it's like, sure, maybe he's good enough to be a GA to a DC, but also like you're allowed to go out and hire another DC. And you look at what Pete Carroll's done in Seattle, it's the same thing. Chris Richard went from being like an analyst of something to being a DC, and it's like, dude, you're allowed to go out and hire people, man.
Yeah. But at the same time, like, you could end up in this, and this is going to be a storyline to watch all season. Does Alabama have a problem on offense? Because in that game against Texas, like, I don't know, maybe I sort of buy into the idea that like a Sark-led offense or a Kiffin-led offense doesn't get beaten down that easily. Like, Bill O'Brien maybe wasn't the way to go. Maybe you can't rehabilitate everybody. I don't know.
I mean,
something to watch. I would never pour the dirt on Alabama's grave this early in a season. They will rise from the dead. Never do that to Nick Saban, but something to watch.
Yeah. We got a chat from Calix Rose that said you got yes men, and it's like, I trust Saban not to necessarily get yes men.
Yes.
Or if Saban's getting yes men turns them, like, even if they are like, you become a yes man in front of Saban because he's intimidating. But then you also turn them into gold. Yeah. And that's the problem with Carroll, is he got the yes men and like without the ability to turn them into anything else.
Yeah.
100%. All right. Kenny's next question is, quote, deranged turnover producing defense, the best description ever. I think so. I think that's pretty solid.
I think that's a Brady McCullough special, and I agree. Deranged turnover producing defense fits the absolute bill, because this defense is deranged in a lot of ways. In all the best ways and all the worst ways.
Yeah. Steve says, do you both have your Pac-12 championship tickets for Las Vegas already? Of course, the Pac-12 is no longer doing division, so it makes it a little bit harder for my brain to like transition to like baseball logic of how you win the division now, or clinch your ticket to the whatever. I think SC is probably in a good shot. I mean, getting the conference, the first conference win under their belt is a good thing. I think right now, Matt Miller from Bleacher Report said that SC should be favored in all the rest of their games. That's probably accurate. But Utah's still going to be tough. UCLA will probably be tough. We've talked about Oregon State before. Like, I don't think I'm ready to just sit here and say that SC is going to walk to Vegas, but they definitely so far look like the best team in the conference by the eye test.
Yeah. That Utah game, that's going
to be the game.
I don't know that I'll be a 100% believer until USC gets through that Utah game. If USC gets through that Utah game, and when I say the Utah game, I mean like the next 3 weeks and then the Utah game, I would I would go buy my tickets to the title game. We'll see.
All right, you're not ready to completely go all in. That's fine.
No,
I mean, your 10-2 prediction was pretty much going all in.
I mean, that's what it felt like. Yeah. So.
Yeah, 100%. All right, guys. This will wrap up the Stanford fallout. Put the big bow on USC beating Stanford 41-28. Later this week, we'll come back on Wednesday nights, 5 p.m. back at the normal time, to talk about USC and Fresno State. And that'll be a fun episode because we get to talk about Jake Haener. And I love me some Jake Haener. He was
Jake Haener, who I saw a quote from today saying,
"Oh, it was a good quote."
Little Jake Haener wanted a scholarship offer from USC, but little Jake Haener was didn't. What was it? He wasn't tall enough.
He wasn't tall enough. I want to go back and find the video because did he say like little Jake Haener wasn't tall enough? Because that would be funny if he said it like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm just gonna call him little Jake Haener for the rest of the time.
No,
with full respect, because little Jake Haener
deserves all the respect from that UCLA game.
Yeah, Jake Haener still is the living embodiment of that X-ray with the bulldog face.
Yes,
in it.
He's got that dog in him.
Dog in him. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jake Haener and the Fresno State Bulldogs come to the Coliseum, and I think if there's any school that deserves respect coming to the Coliseum, it's Fresno State. Do not mess with Fresno State. The 2005 game, in a winning effort for USC, I think eternally won the respect from Fresno State. I mean, they had like 20,000 people there at the Coliseum. It was incredible.
Yeah.
And of course, there's the Freedom Bowl, but we won't talk about the Freedom Bowl.
Hey, 2 wins over Fresno State most recently. So
there you go. Is it 3?
Is it 3? Well, there was the bowl game, the season opener.
The season opener was Sark's first game. The 2019 season opener, and then Clay Helton's first game as an interim head coach in the Vegas Bowl.
There you go.
There you go. All right. We will see you on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific on the YouTubes or wherever you listen to us now. We'll be there then. Until then, see ya.
See ya.
See ya.